All right, so let's get into the first series that I made inside of Blender. And to start off, I did this the first 2 days I got into Blender, and I wanted something, pretty easy to make, and something that I used to do a lot inside of Cinema 4D when I was still using it was doing plane displacement. And as you can see here, I have a lot of renders where I've been, just on a plane doing some noise displacement to be able to create these landscape type of geometry. All of these were made using my Noisescape plugin, and this is why I created it, because I just loved working on planes like that. And in Blender, I don't have it yet. I would probably try and make something similar, but for the time being, yeah, I followed a couple of tutorials on how to work with displacement, and that's pretty much what I came up with. So yeah, for first 3 days in Blender, it's not that bad, right? I mean, they look okay. And yeah, I love the texture, very easy setup. So let's jump inside of the first project. So as you open it up, you will be here on the shader editor. So I'm going to go back to the geometry node editor to show you what's happening here with the geometry node. So I need to remember to zoom in. So we have a grid with a set amount of vertices, and the set position is going to set position of each and every point on the plane. First of all, let's decrease the subdivision so we can actually see what's happening. This is kind of the way to offset each of these points using a noise texture. I have my noise texture, 4D ridge multifractile. I have a rotate vector because at first I wanted to make this animated, and actually you can, these are animated. So if you press play, you can see it's having a hard time right now to animate. So I'm just going to turn down my vertices, right? And I'm going to press play. And as you can see now, the mesh is actually looping with a 90 frame. So it looks pretty neat. And I didn't render this as animation because for a first day in Blender, I was like, yeah, maybe it's too much, right? But we have our animation, which is looped. And the way to loop this, it's fairly easy. You add a vector rotate inside of the W, which is the position of the noise, right? You need to set a position node and a map range, which will range between 0 and 90. So these are kind of the frames and the max speed. So if I turn this down, it's not going to loop anymore. To make it loop, you actually need a pi value. So I'm just going to type tau. So I'm not a mathematician, I have no idea what tau exactly means. I'm not smart enough to get into the nuance of the pi system. Anyway, so we have our noise. We can change the scale. So the lower number, the more zoomed in it's going to be. I'm going to keep this at 0.3. And we have our distortion, which is going to be important if you want to have this type of displacement, right? So without distortion, we simply have the noise. But if we add some distortion, you can see it kind of looks a little bit more like a fabric. Just like that. And next, I added a blur attribute just to be able to blur the mesh out so that we don't have this type of hard edges, right? Iteration 4, a color ramp. The nice thing about the color ramp is that you can actually control how the mesh looks like. And you can do the same thing if you use a RGB curve, and you will have even more control. So let's add an RGB curve. And inside of the color, inside of the color, and here you can control how everything looks. So yeah, you can have more nuance, finer control over the noise. I mean, this look a lot more organic, right? And I'm going to turn down this even more. Yeah, just like that. And something that I want to do is I'm going to unplug the vector rotate. So we no longer have animation. I just want to change this so I can have something like that. Yeah. And I have a combine X, Y, Z, and I just plug this inside of the Z because otherwise it's going to displace the points at every axis. So we just want the up axis, which is the Z axis. So next we have the scale option here to be able to make it more displaced, right? So depend on what you are trying to do, but sometimes the noise is not enough and everything is set inside of the offset of the set position that we have for our grid. So let's put 500 back. So now we have a lot more details and I kind of love what's happening here. I'm going to try to play around with my curves a little bit more. Oh, yes. That's nice. And maybe take this up a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to keep it as it is. I'm gonna scale this a little bit more. Yeah, I think 0.3 was great. Yeah, this is nice. And this is a little bit too much scaled up. So let's turn this down just a little bit. We have our set shade smooth to be able to smooth our grid. And next we have our subdivision surface. So I'm gonna add just one. I think that's enough for what we want to create. And I'm going to change now my window from geometry node to shader editor. Make it a little bit bigger, maybe not that much. And I'm going to enable the render view, right? Right, so let's get into the shader. So the texture that I used was from my chain tile pack. And if you go on the site, you can actually find this under the grayscale tile pack. So the chain, it's this one. So there's a lot of patterns you can choose from. And actually you can also just go onto the Bridge app on the site or using the Windows application and just check the map out, Just go inside of the category chain and you can pretty much see everything that's available. So you won't be able to download if you don't have this unlocked, but you can see that all of these products come with a normal map and a height map. So yeah. And usually, whenever I want to download something, I just open up my application, choose what I want and click download. So yeah, I added this inside of the roughness channel and I also created a bump inside of the normal. So actually, yeah, to create a little bit of displacement, normal displacement. Something that I had to Google to actually find was how to size my texture. And actually what you need to do is a mapping node, right? So I'm using the generated texture coordinate for this one because it doesn't have any UV. So if you try to add the UV, it won't work. Even with a normal, it won't work. Or it's a little bit weird how it's mapped. So yeah, generated works fine. And inside of the scale, I added a value node for to be able to scale up and down my texture. So yeah, this is something that I didn't know how to do, but you actually need to have a mapping texture coordinate and that's pretty much it. So the vector rotate is a plus, just to be able to rotate my texture around a little bit, because sometimes, it doesn't really work well on the edges. Of course, something you can do, since this is a black and white image, you can change the color space to non-color. I think, I don't really know how Blender handles the color space so far, but I realize right now that it actually gives a better black and white definition. So I'm not really sure what's happening, but yeah, it's better if you have a black and white image to set the color space to non-color, right? So as you can see here, right off the bat, it looks a lot nicer. And yeah, so this is in the roughness, and in the normal, I have a color space again to control the normal intensity, black and white intensity, and the strength. So I'm going to set this to 0.5, and we have, oh man, I love this, the reflection that we are having right now. Looks pretty nice. You know what? Let's add another color ramp. So I'm improvising here, and I want to add this inside of the alpha map. So as you can see now, we have a proper fabric type texture. All right, so let's open up the second project. Let's jump into that to see what's up. So it's been a while that I haven't reopened these. So here is the mesh generated. Let's go inside of the geometry node again, and as you can see, it's almost the same setup that I had for the first project. So we have our grid, set position, set shade smooth, and for this one I didn't add any subdivision because it was already enough. So I'm gonna delete the subdivision here. It's gonna be in the file that you download, so sorry about that. I'm still trying to optimize everything as I go. And as you can see here, for the offset, I decided to mix two different noise patterns because I wanted to have a bigger wave pattern with some small noise on top of that, right? So in Cinema 4D, you could do that very easily in using my Noisescape plugin, because I have a couple of noise that can be added on top of each other. But here, to do that, you actually need to create two different type of noises. So as you can see, we have the noise texture, which is fed inside of a blur. So this is the big wave. I'm going to turn this down, right? You can change the W, the position of the big wave. We have a blur attribute because I really wanted to blur this out as much as I can. I have my combine X, Y, Z simply on the Z axis, and I scale factor to be able to scale this up and down. And the same for the second noise. So the noise is another one, FBM noise type. And yeah, the same with the scale, also a little bit up. Inside of a mix factor. So the nice thing is that you can also play around the factor, and you can add another noise on top of that factor to be able to control even more the blending. So you know what? Let's try and add here another noise texture, and I'm going to add my factor to the factor. And I'm going to try to zoom so you can see a little bit more. And let's play around this. So as you can see now. So yeah, if you want to create a landscape, I think that's the way to do it. Of course, now it looks a little bit more organic because I have the blur attribute, and the noises are kind of, this wavy, organic pattern. But I'm going to have some more tutorials about how to make actual landscapes using only a noise. So yeah, let's delete this. And let's go inside of the shader editor and see what's happening. So I'm gonna turn the render view. And as you can see here, we have this kind of lighting, and that's actually a light that I added. So I'm gonna turn my overlays, and as you can see, the light, I'm gonna select it. It's this one right here. So it's very thin and long, and you can actually play around the width of the reflection that it's going to have on your mesh with the height. And if I go to my light, you can see that the spread is very thin, right? And this was how I was able to make that glow. And another thing that I wanted to showcase is we actually have some glare happening, right? Some glare happening here. And to make that, let's go back inside of the camera, even though it doesn't really matter because it won't show up here. You actually need to render it. So let's go to the compositor tab, and as you can see here, this is our rendering. For some reason, Blender is not showing the compositing node tree in the render view. So I don't know if that's an issue, if that's something that would be fixed in a future update. But yeah, so I kind of tried to do some test renders. So I added some fog glow, high quality, and yeah, I did a test render, see if everything was looking right, and yeah, that's how I was able to make this type of glare inside of Blender using cycles, of course. And this time, as you can see, I actually used the displacement, right? Something that I didn't do was get into the setting, the texture setting, and I left this at bump only. So the displacement actually doesn't really work as a displacement, it works only as bump. So if we change that to displacement and bump, you can see now that yeah, funky stuff are happening. Let's turn down that to 1.1. It doesn't really work well just because the mesh doesn't have UV, it's just the generated one. So yeah, again, these are the first project. There's a lot of things that I did wrong. And now let's get into the third one, which is this, the candy, the fluo. And all right, let's get again inside of the geometry node. And as you can see, the same thing happening. Again, I didn't use any subsurface division on it. Set position, the mix factor. So I mixed this with nothing to be able to yeah, I could have done this as well. I would have exactly the same output. Yeah. So yeah, I have some errors in my files, but that's why I'm also making this behind the scenes. So we have a scale, combine, ramp, blur attribute, and noise texture. So, pretty easy setup. And I'm gonna go now to my shader editor. And as you can see, it's a very simple editor. I'm gonna enable my render view. And as you can see, I have 3 lights. So let's get out. I have a huge light that covers pretty much all the surface of my plane. And I have a point light right below the mesh, right? And since I'm using subsurface scattering, you can actually see the red coming up of the mesh upward, which is nice. So here it doesn't look like much, but I did a lot of change inside of Photoshop to kind of accentuate the color. And let's get inside of the texture. So I have a green color, a little bit of roughness, and a subsurface scattering. I added some coat on top of that to add that shine back onto the surface, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. Of course, this took a lot longer to render. I had to add a lot more samples. So yeah, max sample was set to 2048 for this one to really be smooth, as well as a denoiser. So now I'm using the optics denoiser for the next project because I didn't know which one was better, but after following some tutorials, I learned that the optics was a little bit more. But again, I'm gonna have more tips on the video I'm gonna have on YouTube. And that pretty much concludes the behind the scene of our first 3 projects. So hopefully you learn a couple of stuff. I'm also learning some of my mistakes, being able to kind of remap what I've been doing so far. So yeah, hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next behind the scene video. Cheers.